Okay, thank you. Go
Awesome.
ahead.
And we will have time for questions at the end. Isha and I can stay over. So please, put those in the chat or write those down, and we'll come back to those. So my name is Pamela. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a brand and business strategist and a leadership coach.
And I am Isha Vela. I'm a trained psychologist and then took a 4-year training to become a somatic coach. And I focus on relationships and also business leadership.
And for anybody that's not familiar, can you really quickly say what a somatic coach is?
Yeah, I basically help people heal their intimacy wounds, both from the personal and the collective level, and really help them bring their full selves into their business, their full expression, their truth, and doing it in a way that where they can like track what's happening in their nervous system and be responsive to what's happening in their nervous system so they can support themselves.
So really, really thinking about the body. And I found Isha on the interwebs a few years ago, because as I was really leveling up my business, I found myself like my body kind of working against me. I would get invited to do this keynote, and then I would get all these like mystery symptoms, like my body telling me to this doesn't feel safe. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe it's not just about the mind. Maybe there's something that my body is doing here and trying to tell me. And we together we saw this gap in the entrepreneurial space where there's kind of incomplete support for entrepreneurs, whether it's programs that are only telling you like, here's the strategy, here's the mindset, here's what you post on social media, or programs that only focus on like the body and the feeling, but they're not really giving you that business piece. But we didn't really see something that had what Isha and I have combined, which is this kind of holistic approach to building your business.
Yeah.
I'm pausing here to see if you want to add anything, Isha.
Yeah, that when I was supporting people, when I, in different business programs that I've been in, where I was learning about the strategy, I would see people get stuck in the same places. And what I'm going to teach today, my portion is going to get you unstuck. It's going to really like allow you to sort of move aside some of the really common places you get stuck.
And so, we're just introducing this at the beginning. We are launching a business incubator. It's 3 months starting in September. And each month is focused on falling in love with your business or your offer or your portfolio again, really making it be so that it's representing you. The second month is more about like the marketing strategy, like how do you talk about it in a way that connects with your audience? And then the third month is a representation of what we're doing today is what the third month would be, which is the support as you show up for your business. Yeah. And we're doing this from a mind, body, soul perspective. So with the mind part being like really the brand and the business strategy so that you can be communicating effectively. The body piece with Isha, which Isha will be leading.
Yeah, it's really about like getting into the truth of what's actually happening in your body. What is actually rising to the surface to be integrated and healed? Because, from my path and from supporting other people, like what's true is that like we have all experienced trauma in some way. So let's acknowledge it and let's acknowledge how it's coming up. And let's get the skills to meet ourselves in those places in a way that is responsive and gentle to our systems.
And finally, the soul place, which is like, how are you building a business that is connected to your spirit, that is representing you, that you feel really, really good about, and that it's representing all of you, where you're not hiding the parts of yourself that you think are bad or like weird or anything like that, because usually that's where our gifts are.
Exactly.
And so today we're talking specifically more about self-promotion. And I always like to tell just a little bit of my story because I love self-promotion. And I never thought I would say that because I know many of us can have a bad reaction when we think about self-promotion. But back in 2017, I was a young professional who was in a job that was making my life absolutely miserable, like crying myself at night, really, really bad. And so I quit my career with no backup plan, no savings. I just had a cat. And from this like really lost and depressed place, I did something. I just started posting on social media, and I started telling my story and about, being an immigrant in the workplace, about being first generation Latina, college graduate. And from there, like so many things happened, from like being invited to share my stories at conferences and at keynotes and companies, and being on Forbes, and all of this because of this tiny piece of me that was so lost, that was like, okay, I guess we'll just start posting on social media, right? And so much is possible. Like, we hold one piece of the story when we don't share it with the world. And what happens when you share it is you're inviting people to like build that with you, to tell you like, oh my gosh, I totally know what you mean, that happened to me. Or to say like, hey, I want to buy from you, or I want to collaborate with you. Like, it expands so much. And that is what I love about self-promotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I was in the process of building my businesses, it all happens very slowly and progressively over time. And what I noticed when I was first in the invitation, because I felt like I was invited by spirit to become an entrepreneur, I just felt so much arising around, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. We are all very much like, get a government job and stick to it, or right, the safety and security of being with mommy and papi boss, right? And then you working for that. And I really felt like I felt the calling for something bigger, and I didn't have anything like anyone around me that was really modeling that. And also what was coming up for me was this, like all of this feelings of imposter, not knowing what I was doing, and having to really guide myself internally through the process, and understanding that all of the stories that were coming up, like they were really about colonialism and colonial trauma. And because I had done a lot of intimacy work in the 4-year somatics program that I got certified in, I could tell like, oh, yep, this is that, and this is that, and this is that. And so I didn't let those stop me. So I would take steps forward, but I could see how all of those were being sort of woven into the path. And as I moved forward in my business, promoting myself, showing up, becoming more visible, which is really threatening to our nervous system in a lot of ways, because our nervous systems are primed for us to like hide and sort of blend in. But here you are having to stand out and having to express your full self, like, and feeling all the threats around that. That really was what motivated to move forward with this idea of like, oh yeah, backing ourselves in our business through our bodies, and understanding that trauma will arise, and here's how to handle it.
Yeah. And so here we're really talking about the why. Like, what is your internal why for wanting to show up? What is the life, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? Like, what's possible if more people could see your work, and how could you increase your impact in the community that you're reaching? And this is an exercise that I have my clients do. We're not going to do it right now, but I highly, highly, highly encourage you to grab a piece of paper after this and to write down, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is my hope to get, what do I hope to get out of this? And like, what's that vision of yourself in the future? Whether it's like, landing that gig or growing your business, like, what does that look like? And to have that piece of paper, I usually like have it like taped inside my journal, so that every day when I'm like getting lost as to like, why am I sharing today? Why do I have to show up? Remembering like, oh, my why is I struggled so much and I felt so alone at different periods of my life that I don't want anybody to feel alone. Like, I want to be there for the little immigrant kids, and for the first generation college students, and for the new business owners that are trying to figure out, new and not new business owners that are like trying to figure it out. And so, I made this like 2 years ago, and I still laugh every time I look at it. And every time I post it, people are telling me how they feel called out from it. But the reality is that it's a lot safer and more fun to spend our time creating something than it is to spend our time talking about it. There's safety in like, I'm alone in my office and I could like work on this website all day. Like, it doesn't have to feel risky. If nobody sees it, then it's almost like I didn't make it, right? And so the hard part is when you start promoting it. And this is the piece that even if you've learned marketing or worked in marketing in some capacity, it is so different to talk about your own shit than it is to, you know, put together some social media posts for some business that you don't care about. There is a very intimate, vulnerable piece of it.
Yes. And when I saw this picture, this picture is what made me fall in love with Bame. When I saw this picture, I was like, oh yes, I understood exactly what was happening for me in my launches. And, you know, what I realized was that, you know, because of the way that I grew up, I knew that there was some form of self-abandonment happening in my launches, where it's like the vulnerability of being seen, of putting my gifts out there, right? Like the most beautiful parts of my expression, like these are my creative gifts, here they are, world. And possibly experiencing rejection in those was terrorizing. And so I could feel myself going like, maybe not, like, and feeling the energy dropping off of having to really like have faith, like back myself in my enthusiasm, in my yes, this is beautiful. Yes, this is needed in the world. Yes, to your expression, like all of that, I had to really bring it forward that, you know, what we call believing in yourself is really about meeting yourself in that fear of rejection or in that self-abandonment, in the self-abandonment, and saying, I'm not going to abandon myself because this is needed in the world. And I'm going to keep showing up because I'm passionate about it. And because it's like, it is so awesome, you want this, but we have to want it first. We have to really see how awesome it is. And oftentimes we don't really see ourselves clearly because we're seeing ourselves through the lens of our wounding and things like that. So we have to sort of like unsully the lens, like we have to clean the lens through which we're looking at ourselves and looking at what we're creating.
Yeah. And, you know, to share a little bit about like my struggle with this is my family I grew up in Ecuador. My family economically lost everything, like $500 to our name, migrated to the United States. And so there's this fear and this belief in me that it's like, I fear having a lot because losing it could be so painful. So it's almost easier to not have it, to have a small business, to not have big things, because then if I lose it, it's like not a big deal, right? And so these are like the deep things that were holding me back for many years. And, you know, still in some ways, I'm still, you know, fighting, we're fighting it out, you know, but these are the pieces. Like, I think a lot of the time when people don't show up, we shame ourselves and we judge ourselves instead of meeting ourselves with compassion. And so it can be hard to find the balance between like not promoting at all, when a lot of the times when we've been promoted to or sold to, it can feel like this, the typical car salesperson, the ick factor, right? Like, this is why self-promotion gets a bad rep, because maybe this has happened to us and we're afraid of doing this to other people. Maybe we are doing this to other people. So it's like, how do we find the balance between like not promoting it at all and then having it feel like this? And the truth is that they're like, self-promotion is strategic. And it can be confusing because sometimes it's just self-expression and we're just sharing out of a place of like, I'm creating for me and you're seeing it. And then, but sometimes when we're actually trying to promote a business or a service, we have to be strategic about how and what we share. And so, you know, self-promotion feels like this when people don't understand what you're doing, when you haven't earned their trust, when they're just not your people, when they're like, wait, who is this person? I don't even know what you do. That's when it feels like this. And self-promotion really is the intersection of you, your business, your brand, your business goals, the life that you're trying to build, and your customer, your client, your audience, whoever they are. Who are they? What are their business goals? What are their like people goals? And promotion is the intersection of like, how can you say what you need to say, but also in a way that is connecting with how they can receive it and the problems that they're looking to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I see this graphic, I feel like it is very much about like a connection, about sharing of yourself and sharing some aspect of vulnerability, but it's really about truth and congruency.
Yeah. And, you know, this is, so right now we're talking about the what, right? Self-promotion. This is the what. What do you do? You have to keep up with social media trends, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just do email newsletters. It's up to you. You have to show up in some capacity. You're probably going to have to create content. You got to think about copywriting, looking at your analytics to see what performs well, thinking about your overall brand strategy. And it's a lot of stuff. Like, this is why it's overwhelming to think about social media and showing up, because the truth is that it's kind of like, if you can remember when you were learning how to drive, like I remember, you know, holding on to the wheel and being like, okay, wheel, okay, foot on the gas. And then, you know, my parent or whoever being like, okay, well, you know, if you're going to cross the lane, you have to like look behind you to make sure there's nobody there. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I have these two things and now I have to do that too. And so it can feel a little bit like this at the beginning, where it's like, it's a lot of things to think about. And I think this is a big place where people get stuck, because there is an overwhelm of all the shoulds and everybody trying to sell you their formula and trying to tell you that you should do it their way. And what Isha and I are about, and what we truly believe, is that all of us have our very unique way of doing things, and that we are here to support you in making your own strategy. We're here to hold the space for you to find what that means for you. And so, you know, if y'all know me, I am a human design reader. I love using astrology for this. I'm all into the witchy things. And these are two tools that have really helped me understand myself, my strengths, understand what are the best ways of promoting myself. But that's not true for everybody. Like, maybe the Enneagram really resonates with you, or Strengths Finder, or any other type of archetypes or typology, or whatever it is that helps you understand your strengths, maybe places where you could show up differently. And, you know, when you're thinking about your strategy, like, your strengths is one piece of it, but it's also your life. Like, what kind of thing are you trying to build to support your life, and what does your life look like right now? And I love, Isha, for you to share a little bit about, like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, my, you know, I talk about like building a business that is in harmony with your body, i.e. not extracting, right? Not burning out. And I live with a chronic illness and I need to rest a lot, but I'm also a Manny Jenny, which is like, I do have a lot of energy now. I can go, 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 go. And then I need to rest. And I also have, like, you know, a stressful parenting schedule. And, you know, my kids require a lot of care. And so I have to build a business that is like where, you know, my business doesn't bleed into my parenting time. So I have to build in harmony with all of those needs, and like my human needs, my emotional needs. I'm an emotional authority in my human design. So I feel things very deeply. So a lot of my back end is like feeling all my feelings and moving through emotions so that I can show up in integrity. I move my body every day. Like, I really have to spend a lot of time in self-care and quiet and alone time to be able to like be fully present for my business in a way that isn't sloppy.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, back in 2020, I had a group program, I had a membership, and I also was, you know, being coached by a lot of different people. And I started realizing, like, I'm like, what they're telling me to do, like, I can't do that. Like, I can't show up how this coach is telling me to show up. And then I started wondering, like, am I doing the same thing to the people that I'm coaching? Am I asking them to show up or to follow a framework that worked for me, but may not work for them? And then I shut it down. I shut down everything that I was doing, because I was like, wait, wait, like there's something else here, right? There's something about our unique ways of existing in the world where I need a space to figure out what that is for me. And I'm looking for coaches and people that are like really going to encourage me to find my way instead of just trying to like get me to fit into theirs. And that's what we're here to do. We are here to just hold that space for you to find your way. And so as you're finding your way, again, we're talking here about the what, like, how do you do this, right? And so design thinking is a concept comes out of Stanford D School. This is used for product design, but it's also used in so many different ways in business. But essentially, it's the idea that you start from this point. This is a cycle, even though here it's shown linearly in a line. But you start with this idea of empathizing. Like, I have this idea for a service, I have this idea for a business, and I'm going to empathize with my audience, with my clients. Who are they? Like, what things are they thinking about? How can I really think about how I can show up in a way that is that yellow intersection, right? Defining is like really just like, okay, here's what I know. Here's what I found out through talking to people or whatever. Here's what I'm going to try. Here's some ideas how that could work out. That's the ideate. Prototype is like, okay, I think I'm going to try. Like, Isha and I are in the prototype stage. I was like, Isha, you have so much awesome knowledge that I would love to bring to entrepreneurs. Isha was wanting to launch an entrepreneurial program. So we're prototyping this program and we're going to test it out and we're going to see what happens. And after we run it, we're going to go right back to empathize and be like, okay, what happened? What did we learn? And so with business, it's a series of us taking actions that every time help us learn more. And, if you look at Instagram and all the changes that they're doing lately, they don't know what's going to work. They're just guessing. They're just testing it out. And this is true for all businesses. We're all just guessing. We're all just testing it out. And I promise you, even the biggest people that you follow are just guessing and are just testing it out. I've worked with people like big name people who on the outside, it looks like they have it all together. And then we're having a DM conversation and they're like, I'm freaking out. This isn't working how I thought it would work. Or I did this and all my people got mad. And so what I'm here to tell you is we're all just guessing. So if you feel like you're guessing, you're like in very good company. And so that's part of the process, right? And so really we've been talking about kind of like the front end of your business, your offers, it might be your prices, your brand, your website, social media. And a lot of the times when people think about their business, this is what they're thinking about. How do I put out an offer? How do I price? How do I put my brand out? How do I share my portfolio? When really what I have learned is that most often the questions that need to be addressed are coming from this back end place of your business, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I found that in building my businesses, it was really about like, because I had gone through my somatics program, like I had the skills of emotional fluency and like being able to move through all of the emotions of stepping into visibility, like I shared earlier, like all the discomfort that comes up, all the stories that come up, like, oh my God, people are going to get so tired of you talking about the same thing. Like, oh my God, shut up. Like all of those voices and the mindset piece of like, no, like people really need to hear this, and bringing myself like back into that state of like the yes, like this is safe to do. Yes, like I may feel emotionally safe, but actually like I'm in my home, I am actually safe. And if somebody doesn't like it, do I like it? Yes. Okay. I can step forward and make a courageous aligned action, which is to share, right? So the mindset piece around that about like abundance, I am enough, people need my truth, like all of the stuff we need to tell ourselves to be able to battle some of the negative internal voices. And then the emotional fluency piece is like, I don't like to talk about nervous or emotional regulation, but about allowing ourselves to feel whatever's coming up and to feel it all the way through, because oftentimes we don't give ourselves permission to really have our emotions, right? Sometimes we need to burn down an aspect of our business. And that comes, there's feelings of loss and sadness that come up around that. Or, a lot of building our business, I feel like business is like this, like a power path, like a spiritual path where we're having to shed all these parts of ourselves that are conditioned or socialized or not our true self. And that involves a grief process. That involves like, oh my God, I'm terrorized, or I am like stepping into my power. And the ego doesn't like that. And so you get to have all your feelings about that, right? And then the pleasure piece is the nervous system soothing, right? Like not only designing a business that is in line with your, like it's in harmony with your body energetics or with your physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs, but also self-soothing when you feel like, wow, I'm really at an edge here, or I'm launching and this is feeling really like gnarly and scary for me. Being able to soothe yourself, like giving yourself a walk, like knowing how to respond to what's happening in your body.
And I, if you're like me and have gone through a bajillion like entrepreneur courses, trainings, etc., a lot of them will talk about only mindset. Like, what are the thoughts that you're thinking? How are you holding yourself back? And honestly, a lot of them talk about it not really from a place where they really know what they're doing. So it's more like shaming than actually training you to change your mindset. It's like, oh, like, girl, like, you know your worth. It's like, okay, wow, like I am changed because you said I should know my worth. Like it does not work like that, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I found myself stuck and really shaming myself, being like, why can't I do this? Like everybody else is talking to this coach and they say something about mindset and then they just do it. And I just felt a lot of shame around that. And that's when I came to understand that it's like, there was like trauma that I needed to heal with my therapist. And also there's all these other tools that are available. And where, I've worked with Isha now for years as their client. And the emotional fluency piece and the pleasure piece are two pieces that I was missing, which is why I'm like, everybody come to this because this is so needed.
Yeah, and I want to address like the collective intimacy wounds, which I call the livids, right? Lack, isolation, victimhood, imposter, doubt, and shame. And these are the really common places that we get caught up, right? These are the really like the universal places where we can get hooked. And in the first taster event, I talked about the 5 intimacy fears, right? That keep us from truly connecting with our audience, which is around like, the fear of being seen, like around vulnerability, things like that. And so the intimacy wounds, the collective ones that keep you from fully backing yourself are the experience of lack, right? Like oh, I'm not enough. I don't know enough. I need to get more training, right? Those kinds of stories. Or like, if I say this, I'm too much. Or if I really express this, it's like people are going to think I'm extra. Then there's the isolation piece, like feeling like we're separate from the divine, like our expression, like when you have a mission guided business or a soul led business, like it's really coming from the God self, right? From a deep spiritual self. And expressing that can feel really risky, and really knowing, like leaning back into getting support, spiritual support, right? In those moments of feeling like, no, this expression is divine. My gifts are divine, etc. And the victimhood piece, like oftentimes we feel like, we don't feel like we have agency in our lives. And so much of business is about deciding, and we'll get into that in a later slide, but feeling like we lack authorship. But everything in our business is a decision. Like when we really anchor in the truth of like, I can make aligned choices, right? Like I'm not victim to the voices in my head, for example. Like I can work on my mindset. I can respond to myself emotionally. Like those are all decisions where we can meet ourselves, love ourselves a little bit more, and we can support ourselves in our business. And of course, the common imposter phenomenon, I don't call it a syndrome because a syndrome is like, right, coming from within. The phenomenon is something that is imposed from the outside in. So really feeling like inauthentic and unworthy of like being big in the world or shining, right? Like, Pame talks about expressing our brilliance in our business and having that also be enough. And so there's the doubt piece, which is something that I have struggled with a lot, is like questioning myself, questioning my inner reality, but also questioning my like what I share. And it's like, oh, can I share this? Can I not? And being like, coming back to like, no, this is okay. This is actually okay. And then there's the shame piece, right? Like the ways that we make ourselves wrong, the ways that we edit ourselves, the way that we're like, I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing business right. I'm not showing up right. It has to look a certain way, right? And then really unraveling that and being like, no, like this is okay. Like coming back to our sense of rightness within ourselves. Okay. So let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. And can I I just thought of something as you were talking about this, because victimhood is definitely like one of the wounds that I've had to heal. And what, something I learned from Isha is like this idea that like the victimhood is connected to this kind of like rescuer piece. Like if I'm a victim, then I feel like I'm like wanting to also rescue people. And this is something I see a lot with like mission-led businesses. We're kind of in this rescuing space, right? Like I want to save you, I want to rescue you. And I absolutely made that mistake with my first kind of big business, is that I was coming at it from a place of like, I'm here to save everybody. And it just wreaked havoc in my life and everywhere. Right. And so, yeah, I just wanted to like bring that in.
Yeah. It's so good. So good that you brought in that example. Yeah. That's the recipe for burnout for sure. Yeah. And so, some of the practices, like I feel like it's really important for us to be able to identify, and we're going to do a little exercise in a moment where we can like how to manage those inner voices. But oftentimes, like what I teach people is repeatable and sustainable processes, right? I know that people have busy lives, they have children, they have maybe other jobs, right, that are sustaining them. And we have to be able to have our body-based practices be like little digestible bites that we can like sprinkle in a micro kind of fashion throughout our day, because we think like we make somatics complicated. But no, it's like it can be like a moment where you remind yourself like, oh no, I'm enough. Okay, I'm enough. All right. Or it can be a practice of connection where you just like, you take a moment to take a breath and you feel sort of that creative power within you, or you connect to your divine self. Or you make a decision, you recognize, okay, I'm going to make a choice right now. Or even like recognizing that I decided to make myself a cup of tea this morning because my blood pressure was low and I needed to rev myself up a bit. Okay, I can decide that. Like it can be like the stupidest, smallest thing, but those are all the little steps that get you there. Like you can micro your way to like this empowered place, and about like, the feelings of inauthenticity or unworthiness. It's like all that's needed in the moment is truth. Like when I was posting, I committed myself to posting every day because I had like a witch wound that was so about like my block in my throat that I was like terrorized of speaking my truth. And all that, like the question that I would ask myself every day is, what needs to be spoken? What truth needs to be spoken today? What is here today? And I'm just like, I'm just going to focus on that and just say the thing that's here right now. Boom, end of story, right? And in the process of just sharing my truth every day, just like, oh, this is what's downloading, I'm just going to share the truth, and kind of like stepping back, like I'm just the messenger, helped me become like really open up to being seen in my vulnerability and being seen also in my joy and my gifts and in my mission. And then around the doubt, like, sometimes we question our inner reality, like, oh, is this okay? The practice here is about like approval, like being in radical approval of like, yep, this is coming up. It gets to be here. I am feeling angry. Okay, anger gets to be here right now. How can I express that right? Maybe it needs to be expressed. Sometimes you're feeling fiery, like sometimes Aries is in my sign, and it's like, oh God, I have to say the thing. And sometimes it's like, let me temper that a little bit. Let me like work that out a little bit on the back end and bring the message forward without all of that like energy attached to it, but like really just trusting what's coming up for you, right? Being, it's like, okay, I believe myself. I believe what's happening in my body right now, and I'm going to respond to it. And around the shame, like being in a practice of permission, like radical permission, like we're again, like externally referenced. How are they doing it? How are they showing up? And you know what? That's really valuable sometimes. But what I've learned and what I'm really been anchoring in this year, especially, is like, my way is okay. My weird, wacky, oddball way is okay. Like making that okay every day, right? I'm going to give myself permission to say this, to be slutty, to be maybe kind of like fiery one day, and to be like, for me, consistency is like, being all over the map emotionally, right? And so, and letting that be okay. Because in the past, I used to say like, oh, well, I'm spiritual, so I have to show up spiritual every day. And I was like, no, I want to cuss. I want to be able to do this or that. And giving myself permission to keep showing up in that complexity. Yes.
Yeah. And if you're like me, like with like a beautiful big fat brain, you're like trying to like make sense of this and like take notes and like, how do I like think myself out of this? It's really helpful to like know the theory, but part of what will be happening in the incubator, which you're about to get like a little taste of, is, did I freeze?
Nope, you're still good.
Oh, okay. Everybody was just like standing so still. I was like, whoa, I think I froze. I'm sorry. Part of what's going to be happening in the incubator, every other week, there's coaching calls every week, and we're going to alternate. So one week it'll be me, brand strategy, mindset stuff, whatever you want to talk about in that world. And then the alternating weeks will be Isha leading these body-based practices and all the other magical stuff that they do. And so you're about to get like a taste of like, what does it look like? Because it's difficult to think yourself out of like shame and making yourself wrong. So the practices are entering this information from a completely different part.
Okay. So this is a little bit of the practice that we're going to be doing today. So I want you to think about a recent experience you had about like maybe procrastinating in your business, or like being in avoidance, where you noticed yourself feeling like that, oh God, I don't want to do that, or like that feels like edgy. So I want you to remember one of those moments. And I'll be the first to tell you that fear shows up in my business every day. Every day. So I just want to normalize that, right? It's not about fucking your fears. It's about like making love to them. Like, how can we meet ourselves? That's what we're going to do today. So when your ego is activating story, right? You have your nervous system has an experience like, ooh, not safe, ding, 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 right? And your brain says, you know what? I'll clean the house instead of doing this thing that I need to do that feels a lot more vulnerable, right? So this is how it happens. Your brain will activate a story. So I want you to think about a recent experience you had where there was possible activation, right? And want you to remember what story was going on in your head, right? It can be like some people talk here about the witch wound, or right, like I'm a burden, I'm so much, right? Yeah. Or the rescuing. So just feel into the story. And feel like, notice where you feel it in your body. right? And I want you to notice if, like, I want you to sort of tunnel into it, tunnel into the story and see if any part of that story ties into one of the livids, right? Whether it's the lack piece of being not enough or too much, or right, not trusting the universe, that the universe has your back, or victimhood and feeling like things are happening to you versus you being like being empowered, making empowered choices, right? Feeling like an imposter, self-doubt, questioning yourself, or shame around like something's wrong with me, or I can't do it, or editing yourself. Just feel into where the ego story might tie into one of the livids, maybe more than one. And so when you identify like, okay, it locks into one of these, right? More than one or one. In your brain, in your mind, I want you to imagine like a living room space, right? Or like it could be an auditorium or a hall or some space in your brain. And I want you to take the story, and I want you to sit it down in a chair, like off to the side, like, maybe in the balcony section of the auditorium. Like, I see you, thank you for coming, but you need to sit in that section, right? You don't get to take center stage. Right? And it's important that we identify it as something that is collective. It doesn't belong to us. It is not who we are, right? To just, there's an overcoupling, right? And so we're unhooking the story from the ego, right? And so we're putting the story up on a shelf somewhere, and we're cleaning out the ego. And once you have that story sitting up on the balcony section, or maybe outside of the living room in the yard, I want you to do the practice of, actually, I'm enough, or yeah, like I do believe what's happening in my body. Like, I believe the deeper truth of like, I'm seeing myself clearly with my soul, or I'm going to approve of whatever is happening and just make it okay. Or if it's distrust of the universe, right? Like, maybe I can call on my ancestors. Maybe I can lean into that. Right? And in the practice, like when you are in the practice, when you've completed the practice, when you say yes to yourself around like, okay, I approve, this is okay, people want to hear this, then you take aligned action from that place. Then you make a decision from the deeper truth, right? Not the busy noise in your head. You go in a couple of layers, and you're like, okay, no, this is like, I do feel that inner, the deeper truth of like, no, I get to be here and I get to express myself, and taking action from that place. And when fear comes up, like I said, fear comes up every day, right? Sometimes it can be like the kind of fear where I'm just like, oh my God, I need to shake this out of my body. And sometimes it's a fear of like, right? It just feels kind of like a little bit icky. And I'm just like, oof, okay, all right, we're gonna get in the zone. All right. So again, it's not about pushing down your fear. It's not about fucking your fears. It's not about like squashing them, because oftentimes they pop up even harder, and you don't really do anything with them. what you want to do is, I often think about a car, visualize a car, and sometimes our fear in the driver's seat, right? When we're procrastinating, when we're not showing up in ways that like our business needs from us, like our mission is calling us into, the fear is taking the driver's wheels. I'm scared, we're not doing this, I'm going to be in avoidance. What you want to do in those moments is like, feel the part of you that is fearful, like acknowledge it, just say like, yeah, I feel you, this is scary. And the moment that you acknowledge it, there's a little bit of a, okay, you see me. And you can put the fear in the passenger seat of the car, right? You don't need to lock them in the trunk. You can put them in the passenger seat and be like, I see you, I hear you, I get it. And we can do this together. Like I can hold your hand and we can move forward together. My higher self, like my divine self, is going to be taking the wheel, but you get to be here, right? Because we're human and this is a whole freaking spiritual process, right? So you want to relate to the fear in a way that is kind and friendly. And you want to give yourself some breath, right? Like maybe you need to, right? Oh, God, this is uncomfortable. You want to move your body. You want to breathe into the fear. And maybe you want to make sound, like maybe you want to scream into a pillow and feel like how gnarly this feels right now, right? So those are all ways you can support yourself. And then again, taking aligned action based on the bigger picture, not the momentary fear that's here. It's like, what's the bigger point of me doing all this? Yes, it's to help people, right? Like just in a really general way, like, oh, I want, yes. And like connecting with that passion again, connecting with that yes, and be like, okay, yes, fear, you get to be here. And yes, I get to like be with it and relate to it. And then, yes, I'm gonna take aligned action from the bigger mission.
Yeah. And that's where that why that we talked about at the beginning,
Yeah.
like it can really, it sounds so simple, but it can be so helpful to have a tangible piece of paper with it written out, break glass in case of emergency, so you can read it again and remember why you're here. And I wanted to add that like our brain is so sneaky, so sneaky. So it takes practice to be like, woof, I just stopped myself. Oh, there's a fear there. What's the fear? Because at first it's like, well, what if you redid your entire branding? Or man, maybe that offer's like not that good. Like maybe people are over it, or like, oh my gosh, this person just launched the thing and it's really similar and they're charging half as much. It's just not going to work. Or, like me, I would like prepare something and it'd be like, damn it, Mercury retrograde, like again, like I can't launch this right now. There's no way, right? And it would always happen that way, right? And so our fears are so sneaky and they talk to you in your language, right? If you think Mercury retrograde is crap, but maybe you think that, I don't know, you have another belief, right? That you have to launch something the Monday or the first of the month or whatever it is. Your brain speaks to you in that language. And that's why it can be so sneaky. And it just takes practice and curiosity to be like, woof, okay, that was a fear. What is this connected to? Mm-hmm. And we're almost wrapping up here. We're going to stay over and answer any questions that you have. So if you posted a question and we didn't see it, sorry, I haven't even looked at the chat. I love that there's so much action.
I've been writing down the questions, so I've got them here.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, we just want to acknowledge, like, this is why what makes this graphic true. I saw this morning. I'm like, I have to add this in here today, because there's times when what's happening internally is not, it needs to be soothed. There's times when there's like a pandemic, or like, how could I promote something right now? Like there was another mass shooting, like there's stuff happening in the world, right? And then there's times where maybe our marketing needs to be tuned up, because truly we're just using a word that our audience doesn't understand. And it's hard to know which it is. But this is absolutely real. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. I have lived all my life as a kid of an entrepreneurial family, both a very successful one and a very broke one. And regardless of success, monetary success, I can tell you that it looks like this. And, the answer to this is devotion. Being in devotion to your business, seeing entrepreneurship your creative work or whatever you want to call it. I know some people, the word entrepreneurship doesn't resonate, but still you're building something where absolutely all of this applies. But this devotion piece is like really just having this relationship that you're constantly building and loving on and strengthening with your business. And this is one of the beautiful things that I've learned from Isha. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, for me, somebody earlier talked about like trusting in the universe, like really having faith, and that it's challenging. And like sometimes my devotional practice, like I shared, is about moving my body every morning and getting, like, my mindset work is body work, getting my body in gear and getting it like getting it in the mode where I can like open it up and receive. Sometimes, I prayed really hard sometimes in really fearful moments, like, as a solo parent and choosing a relationship structure where I'm on my own and I'm supporting myself. Like I get into like existential crises where I'm just like, universe, are you with me? God damn it, and having to really like pray. Sometimes my devotion to my business is prayer. Sometimes my devotion to my business is feeling all my feelings. Sometimes my devotion is like, I'm going to speak the truth. But it's like, sometimes I don't know if we're going to talk about this in the next slide, but about being responsive to what's happening in the moment. Does that make sense? Like you have a relationship to everything in your business, right? Your expression, your mission, right? All of that.
Yeah. And I just want to share like a different example from my body, which this is, the work that I did with Isha, is that like, I kept thinking that I would love my body after blank, after blank, after blank, right? When my clothes are super cute, when I look this way, when, right? And what I learned through devotion to my body is that the only way to like get there for me was to be in devotion with my body, to like that morning, like, do the things that feel yummy and delicious, whether it's putting on lipstick or wearing that crop top or feeding myself or sleeping or whatever it is. And so it's a practice that helps you create this relationship that you can start today, rather than like something that happens after XYZ. And so devotion is this with your business, is like, it feels hard. I'm going to remember my why, and I'm still going to show up. Like, I still believe in you. Like we're still driving the start. We're still going. You got my back. I got yours. And that's really what it is having your businesses back. We abandon our businesses often, where we just like, oh, that didn't work. I'm going to ghost everybody for a while. Right.
Yeah. And, this decision, right? This practice of deciding people are, most of us, especially if we're assigned female at birth and raised female, we are parasympathetic dominant. That means that we have a lot of fawn response and appeasement response in our systems versus like a healthy fight response, right? Showing up for a business is actually like, we need the healthy fight response, like the passion, right? Being able to back ourselves up and say yes, right? With our full bodies. And this is like, whether you want to call it jaguar energy, tiger energy, right? This like ferocity of this, like, oh my God, I love this so fucking much. I think this is so important, right? Because oftentimes we're like, oh, this is right. And we're in this shrunken place. Right. And sometimes activating fight response, like I get on my spinning bicycle every day to activate this healthy fight response, or I move my emotions to activate the healthy, like, yes, I'm going to fucking do this today. Right. And that is part of aligned action. A lot of times when we drop off, when our energy is fizzling in our launch, is that we're starting to shrink, and we're starting to feel like the activation of rejection stuff coming up, right? Rejection stories, or we're feeling like we're wanting to jump ship, right? We're wanting to abandon the mission, right? But the activation of a healthy fight response, like really activating the yes, right? The animal primal part of ourselves helps us get out of fear, freeze, and fawn responses that do show up in our businesses, right? Like, let's acknowledge that this is actually showing up on our bodies. Let's acknowledge our socialization and conditioning, and let's move the fucking energy around it.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the time. If anybody needs to drop off, feel free. Thanks so much for being here. We'll send the replay. We're almost done with the content. And we just really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off the recording now and people can ask questions.
Still a couple more before you turn it off.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so your business is made up of a bunch of tiny actions, whether it's like working on your services, changing your prices, telling people about it, emailing people. It is all of these actions. And so really what we want to do is take care of our mind, take care of our body, take care of our soul, so that we can continue taking these actions from this place of love and believing in our mission, and not from a place of like an activated nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, what we're really talking about is sustainability, right? We're in the long game of business. Businesses take time to build. And like Bame said, it does take like all these little steps, like these progressive steps. And sometimes, like when I think about, being an entrepreneur, I feel like we need to be able to respond to ourselves. Like sovereign business is responding to what's happening in our bodies. Sometimes my responsiveness is about like, oh, I need to like focus on my emotions today and on processing some stuff that's arising. Or sometimes I really need to work on speaking the truth. Or sometimes I need to be soothing, a lot of soothing. Or sometimes it's like resting. Or sometimes it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna do like a lot of creative writing today. We have to be kind and responsive and gentle with our bodies in order for us to be able to show up in a way that doesn't burn us out and that is really about the long game.
Yeah. And it's this knowing you're driving, and if your fear like keeps like sticking their foot in your face, it's like knowing, when do I pull the car over and like get this situation under control, right? Like I'm going to pull over and I need to tend to this. And maybe I won't post on social media for 2 weeks because this is more important. Yeah. And it's having your own strategy means not making yourself wrong, not judging yourself, not shaming yourself for doing or not doing anything, because you're always looking out for yourself. You're always looking out for your business in the ways that you need to do that for yourself. And you can, all the other strategies, all the other frameworks can like go wherever they want to go, because what matters is what works for you.
That's right.
And so we'll end on this slide and then we'll go straight into questions. We do have some early bird bonuses if you want to join the incubator. All the info is on the website. I will be adding more info on there. If you have any questions, please reach out. We are so excited about this. And so from Isha, you'll get their Own Their No course. If you want to like explain it real quick.
Yeah, it's basically a 4-module course on boundaries. A lot of times when we talk about boundaries, it's this theoretical thing, but this is a mixture between like the 4 facets of boundaries, right? Like, being able to hold more capacity for conflict and not overgiving, and like the containment piece of boundaries, and also where you need to sort of keep energy out, and centering in your sovereignty. And the modules are both the theory and the practice, right? Activating that healthy fight primal energy. So that's all included in the 4-module course.
Yes. And I took that course beginning of 2021 and I am a changed woman. Like really, if you don't join the incubator and you just want to go buy that course from Isha, I highly recommend it because it is so helpful. And then for me, you will get a 30-minute brand audit where, you send me your website, your stuff, and I will record a video reviewing it and just giving you actionable tips and strategies to help you connect with your clients. And you can use this at any point of the incubator. So 8/12, I think it's next Friday. Those are early bird bonuses. And that is all for today. Thank you all so much. Now we can turn off the recording and, hang out, answer any questions that people have.